Here's a local Columbus, Ohio magician posing, doing the candle through arm, which of course is a takeoff on Grant's spike through balloon. The Eureka table base. This is a grouping showing how the height can be changed quickly by the performer. This was truly a great adaptation of something that was already on the market, and it served admirably for the purpose. It was on the market for another reason, and Jen adapted it for magic. It's been a standard for years. This item is called the Center Stage Sensation. It's a production. It sits on the floor and consists of a two-fold screen that's hinged along its long side. You're looking at the concave or the inside area. This concave or inside area faces the audience when you're working the trick. It's also covered with black felt. The other side has some sort of a design on it just to finish it off and give people something to look at when you turn it around and bring it out. You're looking at the concave side of the screen, that is the inside. This side faces the audience when you're working the trick. Now it's also covered with black felt. The other side has some sort of a design on it just to finish it and to provide some type of decoration when you turn it around. There's a triangular shelf. You can see it's about a third of the way up from the floor. Now this shelf rests on little strips of wood, and it's pinned in place so the two sides will stay open just to where they're supposed to be and can otherwise be picked up and brought around, moved, and so forth. Resting on this shelf is a plastic tube. The plastic tube has wide metal bands that serve to support the tube and make it more rigid. They also are able to hide the edge of the gimmick. To give you a measurement perspective here, these glass bowls are approximately 5 inches in diameter. This tube here with a bouquet sticking out of it might be characterized as the outer tube for a square circle. It functions the same. The tube is large enough in diameter so it'll fit over the plastic tube, and it's not gimmicked at all. The outside of the tube might look a little odd to you. That's because it's covered with a part of a throw rug. We got some of those artificial hair rugs. The hairs were probably about 2 inches long. They were in vogue at that time for like kids' rooms and stuff, so on. The rug was cut and glued to the tube, and then the two metal bands, top and bottom, were placed on it to finish it off. Gave it a very unusual look. Actually, it was pretty wild. In actual practice, you had a tube that you could even pet, and then you could show it empty. We had some fluorescent colors, and they contrasted very nicely with the black on the inside. There's another tube which is a gimmick. Naturally, it's not pictured here, but the gimmick is made out of metal. It's the proper size to fit very loosely in the plastic tube. It had a bottom in it. This tube was painted black. Now the gimmick tube height reaches all the way up to the middle of the top metal band. The result of this is that the top band would hide the top edge of the gimmick. Now this whole thing is based on the square circle principle, but it's quite different from the audience point of view. All this apparatus appears to be very open, particularly when you don't have the silks and stuff around here, because this is an advertising picture. Your load goes in your gimmick. The loaded gimmick goes on the inside of the plastic tube, and then the rug tube goes over everything. In the working of the trick, you would naturally take off your fuzzy tube, show it empty. That would leave your gimmick on the inside of the plastic tube to be seen by the audience. Oh, no, not to be seen by the audience. Because what actually happened here was, while the gimmick tube was in there, the reflections on the outside of the plastic tube would blind the audience and break it up enough so that the plastic gimmick would blend into the background. As a matter of fact, the more light you had, the better the trick worked, the more reflections. It worked the same way in room light. I mean, there's always reflections. This gimmick tube in there was absolutely invisible. Spotlight shining in there, no problem. Footlights, no problem. Low room light, hey, even works better. Well, I don't need to describe the rest of the trick because I think you all get it. You can drag out a heck of a lot of junk out of this thing. Here's the ad copy in the previous slide if you want to read it. By the way, this trick was put out between 1970 and 73. Hit the pause button to read it. Okay, here's 3 effects, all a variation of the same principle. The first one is a vampire block. This was sent to Jen by a fellow by the name of Daniel A. Brock. He sent in a full working model and wanted Jen to put out the trick. Suitable negotiations were done and the deal was done. Of course, that didn't stop Grant from thinking. Nothing could do that. In the original effect of the vampire, the visible vampire that is, the block is lowered into the top of the open end of the coffin. Then a wooden stake is pushed through the block, then the block releases itself from the wooden stake by being pulled up by the chain. Grant cooked up this second slide, which is called the Sword and the Stone. This is a jumbo-sized visible vampire. There was a King Arthur patter or some such. The vampire stake was replaced by a wooden sword. The effect and working was the same as the visible vampire. Here are the blocks for the 2 effects. This is a visible vampire. This one is Brock's block. When the blocks were turned right side up, they looked as though it is on the left here. And then when they were picked up by the chain and lowered into the top of the cabinet, these little tabs right here on the bottom of both blocks held the block in proper orientation. As the block was lowered into the cabinet, there were little pieces of wood just above the sword or the stake hole, stake in the vampire, the sword in the other ones, and they were along the side, just immediately above the hole. And what would happen is the block would go in and it would continue, the front part would continue on down. The little pieces of wood would stop the sides, giving the illusion that the block went all the way down to the bottom. In actual matter of fact, just the front and the back section of the block went down. Black art concealed the sides because the sides were angled and they could blend in very well. Okay, this naturally led to a variation, and the variation is called Brock's block. This is Brock's block, and you'll see that there's a sword going through the bottom of the cabinet, which, by the way, Brock's block was about 18 inches high. The original vampire was 11 inches high, and the Brock's block it was about a 4.5 to 5 inch cube. Now what happened in Brock's block was that you had 2 penetrations going down into the tube, then the sword was put in and the block was then freed from the sword. What happened was, in the beginning, the 2 slides as shown here were inserted. The block was dropped in, and the slides acted the same as the little pieces of wood above the hole, in the fact that they stopped the sides of the block, and then the front and back of the blocks would continue on down. Then when you pulled the slide out, everything, there would be a big clank and everything, and then the block would fall down and rest on the bottom slide. Then that was pulled out, and then bang, it was all the way down at the bottom. Of course, this was accompanied with suitable pattern and so on and so forth. But it was kind of noisy, and once again, it had stuff that happened. Here's a shot just before the top slide is pulled out. Here it is after the top slide is pulled out. Now notice the block is not all the way at the bottom, because this bottom slide has to be pulled out to let it fall all the way. The magical penetration second one hasn't happened yet. This variation on the vampire principle shows a trick called the belly buster. This trick should probably go down in the list of way overdone. It's a cabinet stage illusion type thing, about 6 or 7 feet high and appropriately wide and deep. The board going through the center of the cabinet was the one on which your victim would recline. For some reason or another, there was fringe hanging down that as a person would slide in, they'd move the fringe. I don't know why. There's a large block here made out of wood that the audience is led to believe weighs 300 pounds, and it is suspended above the person. It's picked up and handled by using this rod that's attached to the front and the rear center of the block. Of course, if you look closely at this tiny little chain holding up this 300-pound block, but I guess don't look closely. In any case, with the block firmly secured with his massive chain at the top, a person reclines on the board, they're shoved in the illusion, they push the fringe aside, an assistant front and back unhooks the block and starts lowering it, placing the person in peril, and the bottom of the block will continue on down just below the top edges of the doors shown in the bottom of the picture. The whole procedure is reversed. The person gets out, none the worse for wear. In the beginning of the trick, they can start by having the block at the bottom of the cabinet. That's why the doors are too short to cover everything. And then the magician or people can lift the block up and secure it, and then put the person there. Apparently there's some reason given why they don't go any further. Maybe the screaming is too loud in the back row. I really don't know. But like I say, the whole thing was way overdone. Only a few of them were made. So if you got one, save it for 20 years and put it on eBay. That's it. About 1964, Don Tanner arranged a testimonial dinner for Jen Grant. It's one of those things that's supposed to be a surprise and ends up part of a surprise. This picture here shows two of the documents associated with it. On the left-hand side is an award that was given to Jen, which has been lost actually, and even in the original picture we can't read what it says. On the right-hand side is the guest book. On the left-hand side below, there is a little figure, which is a little statue that was given to Jen. Here is that statue. It stood about 6 or 7 inches tall. The right hand has been broken off when this picture was taken. He was holding a fan of cards with 4 aces in it. Also, he had a cigar in his mouth. It was just one of those cute little things. It was done by a lady by the name of Kathy Piper of Piper Puppets. Kathy was a puppeteer who had a workshop up north. She did shows and manufactured custom puppets, not only for her act, but for other people's acts too. This is Kathy Piper, taken around 1967. She's shown here in an advertising shot wherein both she and Jen collaborated on a trick called Ricky Rabbit. It was marketed by Jen around that time. Ricky was a hand puppet that actually did some magic. And one of the tricks that he did was called the Silk on the Rope, which was marketed under the name of Dino's Silk on Rope. When the trick was performed, the magician had a short length of rope. He would tie a loose knot in it, and visually and instantly a silk would appear tied on the inside of the tied knot. Quite a good effect. Another effect the puppet did was he would make his ears vanish and they would reappear. Actually, the magician took his ears out of the top of his head and vanished them in a devil's napkin, and then there were threads on the inside of his head, and you'd pull them and the ears would come back out of his head. It could either be made to come out fast or slow, depending upon the pattern. Here we see a picture of Jen and Dolores, his wife. To Dolores' right is Joe Grant, their boy. Peeking in the other side of the picture is our perennial MC, Jay Marshall. Jen Grant with Vern Slattery behind the podium. Vern was the assistant director of the Magi Fest for as long as Don Tanner ran the Magi Fest. Behind the podium this time is Walt Rollins. Walt was a magician from Canova, West Virginia. He's no longer with us. He was a mortician by trade, a magician by choice. He put out some very, very unusual tricks. They weren't the usual take a card and I'll find it and so forth. But his tricks were not widely circulated. Again, peeking in there is Jay Marshall. Here's another one of those banquet shots. Jay Marshall, Jen, and Dolores. Jay's handing Jen something. No, I guess it's not the check, but whatever it is a mystery. Now, there were 2 gifts associated with this shindig, one of which was a very good set of china. This shot here shows, well, of course, the pose shot showing Don Tanner theoretically giving the china to Jen and Dolores. The other was a set of silverware. Once again, a pose shot, Don Tanner giving them that. This last thing here is kind of a gag gift. It is a man's white t-shirt, ordinary cotton t-shirt, and the stencil designs that are done in the time that the shirt is in the paint room, which can be a couple of weeks or a month or something. As the products are painted, the t-shirt's brought out, one of the designs is put on in rather haphazard manner. Obviously no 2 of them are the same. One last special note here. After the banquet there was a show which consisted of 2 acts. One was Jay Marshall. Well, we couldn't keep him off, but no, just kidding. The next act was Al Flosso. who was an old and dear friend of Jen's. They had corresponded, and Al bought magic from him, but they hadn't seen each other for a good 25, possibly 30 years. This goes back to the time when Jen had a magic store in New York. But Al did his ever-present Coney Island Faker act, and to a small crowd, just to watch the old master work, the only thing I can say is we were captivated.